Okay, hello. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about some things I was thinking about. I've been thinking about a lot of things, but it's hard to form all of them into a BBC. I've been thinking a lot about divisive speech, but I'm putting that off for another day. I also been thinking about some conversations I've heard recently around people who are incarcerated, about men and women that are incarcerated. And I was thinking about what we call in Buddhism acquired ignorance. And I wanted to try to dispel some notions that I think some of these things represent. And for me, to tie this into the Dharma, I see this as a way of bearing witness to men that I haven't met very many women inmates, but men I have met. And I feel this is a way to be compassionate. So what I was thinking about was just the power of the word inmate and what kind of thoughts come to a person's mind when they hear that word, what we associate with the person, and what kind of preconceptions that we have. And one conversation that made me think of this had to do with general statements about people's abilities and intelligence that were inmates. And I was thinking about this because I went back to check. I've been going to state penitentiaries since at least 2006, and I've been to about 5 of them, and I'm guessing I've met about 300 men. I don't know how many, but in 2 states. And then I've gone to 1 county jail and met, just seen people individually, so met 3 or 4 people there. And I was thinking, how would I describe those people? Like for people, when they hear the word inmate and all these ideas come to mind, I'd say the most accurate thing I could say to somebody is, imagine you're at a stoplight and somebody stops, it's a 4-way stop, and somebody stops, and you're just sitting there at the stoplight, and it's like blinking yellow for the other people. They stop and then they go, they stop and then they go. The people that are in that car that stop and go and stop and go, those are like the inmates you're going to meet. You couldn't say anything particular about any of them hardly, because some of the generalities that I hear, they just don't fit my experience at all. So I think that if you're wondering what inmates are like, they're kind of like the people you see at a stoplight. Really varied, really varied. They have, like anywhere and everywhere, people have all different kinds of intelligence and ability to articulate their thoughts and what we call maybe emotional IQ or social skills or leadership abilities, artistic skills, musical skills, all those things. They're as varied as anyone you would ever meet. What I could say I see that's in common with the people that I've met is that, because the ones that I meet are self-selected and they go to the Buddhist group. So I would say that the thing I see in common in those people is they are looking for peace of mind and they're turning to the Buddhist teachings to learn something. And that's about it, really. So when I read about this 3 or 4 inmates defeating Harvard people in debate, that doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, there's all kinds of people everywhere, So that's not a surprise. What does surprise me is that there aren't more programs for inmates, because roughly 1 in every 100 people in the United States is in prison. So what surprises me is that we don't have more programs. And then what also surprises me is that there are only what I prefer to call extended family visits now only in 4 states. They used to have it in 17 states here back in the early 90s, but now as of 2016, only 4 states, including Washington, allow the word, I don't even know how to pronounce that, conjugal visits, but it's really family visits, because it's extended family that are allowed to actually spend time with certain inmates. And I see this when I go to Airway Heights, and I asked one of the guards, I was saying to one of the guards recently, because almost every time I go there, I go on a Saturday, there'll be this cart come in, and there'll be food on it. And what happens is certain inmates who have certain privileges because they've behaved very well and they meet all their criteria are allowed to spend time with their significant others, their children, their grandparents, in a small little like dive of an apartment probably. But they're allowed to have some family time like every so often. I don't even know, it's every couple times a year or whatever it is. And I know that I asked the guard about this. Well, I didn't ask, I was praising the guard because I knew this wasn't very common, and I'm sure there's a real hassle because they have to check all this food and you can only bring in certain things, and it's a lot of work. But what does this do for people? I'm surprised that we don't consider more with 1 in 100 people in prison what's going to happen when they get out, and can we help to keep their families together, because that's the purpose of this. So I'm kind of surprised by that that went the direction of less opportunity rather than more. And then it also surprises me that states still allow capital punishment, especially when, I don't know all the details of this, but I did kind of try to look up some things quickly today for this, that, one study shows from the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences decided that probably 4% of the people on death row were likely innocent. And then some other numbers show that things like since DNA evidence has come in, that 20 death row inmates since 1992 have been found to be innocent, and that the DNA evidence has only been used in a small fraction of crimes. So, that leads us to know that there are innocent people on death row. That's just a fact. So that surprises me. And then it also surprises me that this thing I mentioned, I don't know when I spoke about this, sometime last year or the year before, about compassionate release, this idea of letting people who are really old or near death or have exceptional circumstances or exceptional situations in maybe their extended family or whatever, be released early if they're deemed to be suitable. And so last time I spoke about this, one of the problems there was the prison bureau, the Bureau of Prisons. But actually I didn't realize that maybe even around the time I spoke about this or even afterwards, but in December of 2018, there was an act passed by Congress or the government, First Step Act, which is a compassionate release program. And what this did was, what we have in law now is the ability to kind of make it so that instead of the Bureau of Prisons needing to have a motion for this, and they weren't moving on it, that the Sentencing Commission would. But why isn't it going anywhere? It's gone nowhere. It's in law, but it's not enacted. And you can read about cases that are, that all the different judges are having to figure out how to deal with this. And why is that? That's because the definitions, the criteria, need to be rewritten, and unfortunately, the people that rewrite them on the Sentencing Commissioning Board, right 2 weeks before this came into law, they lost 2 of their members, and they don't have a quorum. And since we have the Trump administration in office, this has never been filled since December of 2018. So here we are, this many months later, and that commission can't really do anything because they don't have the power to do anything because they don't have a quorum. So here we have a law that we can't enact, which means that right now people are losing their cases. Every judge has to deal with this in every state, So these are the things that really I feel it's important for people to be aware of. Everyone can do their part in helping, 1 in every 100 people in this country by being aware of what's happening with our prison system, what's happening with the people in it, what the different kind of problems are and opportunities too, to support the officers that work in the prisons, to support the officials that we elect who are ultimately making laws and then supposed to be putting people into these positions so they can administer these things. This is what happens when you don't fill governmental positions, which is, a lot of things hurt a lot of people. There's people that are, that have could have been released legally by this law who are going to probably die in prison. And that's the one thing I have learned from going to Airway Heights since 2006 or 5, somewhere in there. No one wants to die in prison. I can guarantee you that. So this is an act of compassion on our part, to be informed, to bear witness, and to do what we can to help the humanity raise itself to a little higher level.